Welcome back. Now that we've gotten the majority of the gun disassembled, um, part two is going to focus entirely on the pump slash valve tube and disassembling it. Now, what we have is, even though the screws are removed, um, the one that's just in front of the trigger guard actually screws into a portion of the valve and helps hold the valve in place. You also have uh, an indentation back here on the bottom of the tube. It's pressed, punched in, and the valve goes and seats up against that. So the valve isn't really going to move at its current location. It's going to have to be forced out, but first we have to remove the pump handle. Now, that involves this infamous roll pin. Um, Now, one of the things we want to do before we even try to attempt to remove the roll pin is remove the pressure, because the valve is still firmly seated where it needs to be, and eventually will need to be pressed out in this direction. Um, the pump handle closed is pushing the piston up against the valve, which is putting pressure on this whole assembly back here against the roll pin itself. So we want to make sure that the pump handle is open to remove that pressure. Now what I have here is a small block of wood, fairly thin. I have a this is from my work. It's a rectangular piece of aluminum, very flat. I use it for flat sanding on when I need to flat sand something, but I'm going to use that to support the tube to raise the end up off of, obviously, the table. I don't want to be pounding that roll pin into something solid. So we're going to overhang that portion just a bit past this wooden block. Now, a lot of people, including myself, have used a nail inserted, centered on the roll pin to pound it out. That's why I have my small hammer here. One of the bad things that happens with that is the end of the roll pin, before it will actually, the roll pin will start to be pressed down, because the end of the nail is tapered. It will want to flare out the end of that roll pin, which is going to make it harder to push through the hole. It's a very pretty tight press fit. So when it flares out, it's not going to want to go through that hole. And if you force it through the hole, you risk damaging the hole itself, either, making it out of round or larger than it really should be. So I have a small flat pin. What you can use in place of this, if you've got a decent set of drill bits, let's say you have a dull drill bit, make sure it's one that is smaller than the actual size of the roll pin. You can, if you've got a vise, that's something that I would recommend you having. A lot of people have a bench vise, not everyone, but if you do, chuck this up in your vise and put on some safety glasses. You want to grip the fluted portion where it meets the shank of the drill with some vice grips and just quickly give it a good twist with your wrist and snap the fluted portion of the drill off, and you're just left with the shank. This one is slightly smaller than the roll pin. I've been working on this for a while, and as you can see, I am getting it pushed out. You can see this end, I've been working on hammering it from this side. It is getting pushed out, but it's taking a lot more work than, believe me, I thought it was going to take to get this pushed out. So I'm going to continue working on that. Still working on it. Got it pushed out even further. Now, one of the things I will suggest, one of the things I previously mentioned in regards to using a nail to press it out, what I found out in my garage were some of these trim nails that you would use for like gutters. They're aluminum. So it's not really going to affect as much the mushrooming risk I mentioned. A steel nail, you risk mushrooming and flaring out the end of the roll pin. This aluminum nail is going to do a better job of avoiding damaging that roll pin. It's also going to avoid damaging the hole in the tube itself once that roll pin has gotten down below level with the tube, which this one from this side that I'm pounding on has. Let me continue working on that. Now at a certain point we've got to pushed out this far. If you've got a set of vice grips, you probably get it on there, lock it down pretty tight, and work it back and forth as putting pressure on it, pulling it towards the side it's coming out from, and get it out that way. I don't have my vice grips with me, so I'm going to, actually my good set is at work, but I'm going to continue working on pounding this out. It's getting there. Again, just got to be patient with this. Okay, that's how far I've gotten it out, and at this particular point, even though the pin is not out the back side, it is beyond the travel of holding in the pump arm. So, okay, finally, it is out. Now the one thing I want to point out that I'm actually impressed with as far as Crossman goes, the roll pins they've used in the past, and it's the most common roll pin I've ever seen. I'm gonna give you an example of one. It's a much larger one, wouldn't be for this size hole, but normally it's a rolled piece of metal like this, and it has a slot cut all the way down the length of the tube. I don't know if you can make that out, but there's a slot all the way down here. That's that's what Crossman has used in the past, and that is all I am familiar with ever seeing with roll pin. That is a larger version, but this particular roll pin that they're using is actually one piece of metal. Looks as if it was a rectangular flat piece of metal that literally has been rolled up into almost a solid pin. It is hollow, but yet there is no slot in it to expand or contract. This is a much more solid version of a roll pin than what I've normally seen and what I've seen Crossman use in the past. So kudos to them for using this. I did not realize that this was as solid of a roll pin as it is. But that being said, at this particular point, now that that's out, what this is going to allow us to do is simply pull the barrel band out. All one piece. Now, I want to make sure that there's no burrs on the inside of that hole, because as we pull the pump arm and the piston assembly out, piston has an O-ring on it that's going to have to come back completely past these roll pin holes. Certainly you don't want any burrs hanging up on that O-ring and damaging it. There's the pin that holds the pump arm to the piston. It's actually not the O-ring, it's the piston cup itself that we don't want to be. The piston cup is what we don't want to have hanging up on any burrs and getting damaged. But that's your piston and your piston cup on this end of it. This rubber piston cup, which is what closes up against the cone-shaped end of the valve. Now there should be one thing left in the tube, and that's the valve itself, which, as I said, will only go out one way. The same end that the pump arm and the piston came out of is the direction we want to be pushing the valve out. A lot of people use the barrel for pushing the valve out. Which works just fine. We don't want to be smacking the end of the barrel. So I'm going to use the block of wood over the end of it. That knocked it loose. Now the valve has an O-ring that we don't want getting nicked up on any burrs. There we go. Barrel worked just fine for that. aluminum valve assembly. As you know, the much older versions of the 13 series guns used brass, but they moved to aluminum. There very well may be air stored inside of here because of some pumping action I was doing with that arm prior to removing the pump arm. So we want to release that. You could hear that. That was air stored in the valve. Now the valve pin will move in freely, which we want to do before we start breaking apart the valve. But now the disassembly is complete. What we've added was, now we have an empty pump slash valve tube. We have the valve assembly itself. Got the piston. And we've got the pump arm linkage. And now we can start on modifying different things. We're going to start out, I'm going to start out with some routine maintenance, so to speak. It's going to involve some polishing. Probably start off with the trigger group and the sear. That'll be the first thing I'll go about doing. At this particular point, leading into the next video and ending this one, what I'm going to make a suggestion is a tool that you may already have that I'm going to be using. If you don't have it, you're probably going to want to pick one up, and that is a Dremel tool. That is a brand name of a handheld die grinder. But Dremel has become synonymous with the tool itself, just like Kleenex is a brand name of facial tissue. Although the one that I have is a Dremel brand. If you don't have one of these, I suggest you get one of these. They're available online. It does not have to be a Dremel brand. What I do recommend is that if you do pick one up, that it comes with a accessory kit with various polishing bits, grinding bits, sanding bits, cut-off wheels. All of that we'll be utilizing. And this particular one that I picked up, if you look at the back, it shows all the different accessories that it came with. Instead of having to buy a just tool by itself and then having to buy the accessory kit separate, you're probably going to save yourself a little bit of money by purchasing a set that's all together. Another thing I would recommend, if at all possible, not totally necessary, but this particular one has two different speeds, a low speed and a high speed. That's also going to come in very handy with some of the modifications I'm going to be making. So, you can, like I said, you could pick a tool up just like this. Does not have to be the Dremel brand. On eBay, extremely inexpensive. I want to say anywhere between $20 and $40 depending on the brand you get and the type of accessories that comes with it. Harbor Freight has it. Believe me, I have a lot of stuff that I've purchased from Harbor Freight, but definitely going to want a Dremel tool, and I guarantee you, if you do not already have one and you pick one up, not only will it come in extremely handy with modifying your air guns, you will find uses for it all over the place throughout your house and in your garage. So it is a really handy thing to have. Really recommend getting one of these. As far as the things I'm going to be doing, it is actually a necessity. So that's one of the things. The other thing you're going to want to have is a drill. Whether it be cordless, whether it be corded, doesn't really matter. As a matter of fact, I many times prefer using my electric corded drill as opposed to one of my cordless drills. But you're going to want that. Again, an inexpensive one will do just nicely. Get one at Harbor Freight, very cheap. Those are the two tools for right now that I'm going to suggest heading into the next video, where we're going to be doing a lot of polishing, mainly with the Dremel tool, if not entirely with the Dremel tool. So the gun is 100% completely disassembled at this point, with the exception of breaking apart the valve assembly, which I will get to that, and when it comes time to working on the modifications to the valve itself, we'll be breaking down and going over the internal parts of the valve assembly. So thanks for checking out this video. I hope you're enjoying the series, and leading up to the next one, which will involve some cleaning and polishing of different parts. Be sure to come back and check that out. You guys stay safe, shoot safe, and take care.